The universe hated Jace Harlan, and Ralvin 9 was just its latest instrument of spite. The alarm was a high, thin scream that cut through the cockpit's groaning metal. Jace's ship, the Pryhawk, was a repurposed Terran intelligence scout, fast and quiet, but never built to take a hit. Now, it was coming apart around him. Smoke, thick and acrid, poured from the console. "Failed intel drop," he spat, wrenching the control yoke. The words tasted like ash. This was supposed to be simple. Drop the data chip at the rendezvous, pick up his credits, and be gone. But the rendezvous was a trap. 2 heavy frigates, unmarked, had boiled out of the moon's magnetic shadow. He had dodged the first plasma volley, but the second had slagged his port engine and shredded his navigation array. He was blind, bleeding velocity, and falling into the gravitational well of a moon that was 99% uninhabited jungle. Ralvin 9, a backwater rock known only for its toxic pollen and magnetic storms. A perfect place to die. The atmosphere grabbed the Pryhawk and tried to tear it in two. The ship shuddered, a violent, bone-jarring vibration that rattled Jace's teeth. He fought the controls, not to save the ship, it was already dead, but to aim the crash. He poured the last of the auxiliary power into the ventral thrusters, trying to level the descent, trying to turn a suicidal dive into a survivable impact. The canopy cracked, a spiderweb of fractures obscuring the violent green blur of the jungle rushing up to meet him. "This is gonna hurt," he muttered. The impact was less a crash and more a disintegration. Metal screamed as the ship tore through the canopy, shearing off wings and stabilizers. Jace was thrown against his restraints, the world dissolving into a chaos of noise and pain. Then, silence. He woke to the smell of burning electronics and damp earth. His head felt like it had been split with an axe. He unbuckled, his body aching in a dozen places, and fell from the pilot's chair onto the buckled deck. Rain, thin and steady, was already hissing against the hot metal of the hull. He grabbed his emergency kit and his sidearm, a reliable heavy-energy pistol. A quick systems check confirmed the obvious. The comms were fried, the reactor was leaking, the Pryhawk would never fly again. He was stranded. Jace kicked open the mangled cockpit hatch and slid down the hull into 3 feet of alien mud. The jungle was overwhelming. Trees, thick as ancient towers, rose into a misty green twilight. The air was heavy, smelling of ozone and rotting, oversized flowers. He checked his bearings by the weak, filtered light of the primary sun. He was at least 50 clicks from the rendezvous point. 50 clicks of this. He was debating whether to find high ground or just start walking when he saw it. Smoke. It was thin, a darker gray against the green mist, rising from a ridge about a click to the north. It was not from his ship. His old intelligence instincts, rusty from years of smuggling, flared to life. A trap? Survivors from the ambush? He moved slowly, his blaster held low, using the massive moss-covered roots for cover. The jungle floor was a treacherous carpet of slick vines and bioluminescent fungi. He moved with a practiced silence, a ghost in the green. As he crested the ridge, he saw the second wreck. It was not a warship. It was a luxury skiff, a high-end personal transport. Gold alloy plating, now scorched and peeled back, revealed a chassis of pearlescent white. It had plowed a deep furrow into the earth before slamming into a rock face. The elegance of its design made the violence of the crash even more stark. It was built for comfort, not survival. He scanned the wreckage. 2 bodies near the main cabin, wearing the simple gray uniforms of private security, were clearly dead. Another, in a pilot's jumpsuit, was slumped over the controls. Then he heard a sound, a soft, muffled sob, He raised his blaster, moving toward the rear of the skiff. A section of the hull had been torn open, revealing what looked like a personal lounge. Velvet seats were ripped from their moorings, and broken crystal littered the floor. Huddled behind a heavy overturned table was a woman. She was staring at him, eyes wide with terror. She was young, almost impossibly beautiful, with skin the color of pale moonlight and hair like spun obsidian. She wore a gown that might have once been magnificent, a deep emerald silk, but was now torn at the shoulder, stained with soot and dark with what he assumed was blood. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was a melody, even in its fear. "Don't hurt me." Jace lowered his pistol just slightly. "Who are you? What happened?" "Pirates," she said, her words accented precise. "They came out of nowhere. Our escorts. They didn't stand a chance. They shot us down. I think I'm the only one left." She looked innocent, fragile, and utterly lost, the textbook definition of a damsel in distress. And Jace Harlan hated damsels in distress. They were complications. They got you killed. "Stay hidden. Smart," Jace said, his voice a gravelly rumble. He holstered his blaster but kept his hand near it. "We need to move. This jungle isn't safe, and whoever shot you down might come back to check their work." He offered a hand. She hesitated, looking at his calloused, grease-stained glove, then took it. Her hand was slender, soft and trembling. He pulled her to her feet. She was taller than he expected, graceful even in her ruined state. "My name is Varelia," she said, pulling a stray lock of black hair from her face. "Jace." He didn't offer his last name. He turned and started scavenging. He found an emergency beacon in the skiff, but it was smashed. He grabbed 2 water purification canteens and a medical kit. "Can you walk?" I think so." She took a step and winced, favoring her left ankle. But she didn't complain. He looked her over. She was definitely not Terran. Faint, silver markings traced the skin at her temples, disappearing into her hairline. They looked less like tattoos and more like circuitry, glowing with a faint residual energy. "Where were you headed?" he asked, strapping the supplies to his harness. "A diplomatic mission. Incognito," she said quickly. Too quickly. "To the Terran outpost on Varnessa." Jace grunted. That was 3 systems over. "Well, you're a long way from home. Let's go. We need to find shelter before the storms hit." "Storms?" "You'll see." He led the way back into the oppressive green. He set a hard pace, wanting to put distance between them and the 2 wrecks. For the first hour, he could hear her slipping and stumbling behind him. The jungle floor was a nightmare of slick moss and ankle-twisting roots. He never slowed down. If she couldn't keep up, she was a liability. But she kept up. When he paused at a stream to refill the canteens, he looked back. She was breathing hard, her face pale, the torn silk of her gown snagging on every thorn, but her eyes were not weak. They were alert, scanning the jungle canopy with a sharp, intelligent focus. A branch snapped in the trees above them. A high-pitched chittering echoed through the gloom. Jace spun, blaster raised. "Get behind me, now!" Varelia didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She moved, pressing herself against his back. But as she did, her voice was not the whisper of a frightened girl. It was a sharp, clear command. "What is it?" she asked. "No. What's happening? Or I'm scared." "But what is it?" "Local fauna," Jace muttered. "Canopy stalkers. They hunt in packs. Don't move." He saw a flicker of movement, a gray furred shape with too many legs. He fired a single shot. The bolt sizzled through the air and the creature shrieked, falling to the forest floor. The rest of the pack scattered, their chittering fading into the distance. He turned to look at her. The flicker of command was gone. She was trembling again, and the fragile noble returned. But he had heard it. He had felt it. "You're hurt," he said, nodding at her arm. A long scratch from a thorn bush was bleeding freely. "It's nothing." He grabbed her arm, ignoring her protest, and pulled out the med kit. He sprayed a cleanser on the wound. She hissed as it foamed, but didn't pull away. As he applied the bio-bandage, he saw the markings on her temples again. They seemed to pulse with a slow silver light, then fade. "Strange markings," he said, his voice neutral. "They are a sign of my house," she said, pulling her arm back. "A tradition." "Right." He capped the cleanser. "Let's keep moving." They walked for another 3 hours. The green twilight of the sky began to darken, shifting to a sickly, bruised purple. The air grew heavy, static electricity making the hairs on Jace's neck stand up. "Under the roots." "Now," he ordered, pointing to a massive, overturned tree whose root system formed a deep, dry cave. They scrambled inside just as the sky opened up. The rain on Ralvin 9 was not water. It was a thin, corrosive acid, and it fell with a furious hiss, dissolving the leaves and smoking where it hit the stone. They sat in the cramped darkness, the roar of the storm outside. Jace watched her. She was shivering, whether from cold or fear. He couldn't tell. She had pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, trying to make herself small. She looked like a lost child. He sighed, the sound loud in the enclosed space. He unclipped a ration pack from his belt and tossed it into her lap. "Terran Haute cuisine," he said. "Don't eat the red paste unless you like chemical burns." She fumbled with the vacuum-sealed pack. He watched, half amused, as she tried to figure out the tear strip. She was clearly someone who had never opened her own food. Finally, she got it open and sniffed the contents suspiciously. "It's gray," she observed. "Nutrient paste. It'll keep you alive." She took a small, hesitant bite of the main paste. She chewed slowly, her expression unreadable. Then, curious. She dipped a finger into the smaller secondary compartment, the high-energy stimulant paste, the one Jace had warned her about, though he'd called it red. This batch was orange. She put it in her mouth. Her eyes went wide, utterly, comically wide. A strangled cough burst from her throat, and she fanned her mouth, her face flushing a pale shade of lavender. She grabbed her canteen and drank deeply. "That," she gasped, her voice hoarse, "has a fire." Jace let out a rough bark of laughter. It surprised him. He hadn't laughed in months. "That's the get-you-moving part. I told you not to eat it." "You said the red paste. That was orange." She was trying to look indignant, but the watering eyes and the faint smile at the corners of her mouth betrayed her. She took another, much smaller bite of the gray paste. "This is not good." "Yeah. Well, that's all we've got." She looked at him, the fear in her eyes replaced by something else, a flicker of warmth. "In my culture, sharing sustenance, even gray paste, is a bonding gesture. On my ship, it's called not letting the cargo starve." She tried to smile, a genuine, humanizing expression that lit up her face. "This situation, it is, as you humans say, off the chain?" Jace stared at her for a long second, then chuckled again, shaking his head. "Not even close. Off the chain is supposed to mean good. This is bad. We just say this is bad." "I see." She looked down, a small smile playing on her lips. "I will endeavor to remember that. This is bad." The moment passed. The storm raged. The flirtatious, easy instant was gone. replaced by the damp cold and the hissing of the rain. But something had shifted. She was no longer just a burden. The storm lasted for 6 hours. When it finally subsided, they moved on. The acid had stripped the jungle, leaving a steaming, skeletal landscape. Virelia was adapting. She watched where he placed his feet and mimicked him. She learned to test branches before putting her weight on them. She was still untrained, but she was a quick study. They were following a ridgeline. Jace hoping to find a high point when he heard it. The one sound he hadn't expected to hear on this God's forsaken moon. Running water. He motioned for her to wait, to stay hidden in a thicket of alien ferns. He scouted ahead, pushing through the last line of foliage. He stopped. Frozen. The ridge broke away into a wide, clear water pool, fed by a waterfall that tumbled down a sheer cliff face. The water was a stunning, impossible shade of turquoise, and the air was clean, free of the jungle's rot. Virelia was already there. She must have heard it too and circled around him. She was standing in the pool, the water up to her waist. The ruined, filthy gown was in a heap on a flat rock nearby. She was using the cascading water to wash the soot and blood from her arms and face. Jace knew he should turn away. It was a decent thing to do. The professional thing. He was a smuggler, not a voyeur. But he couldn't move. Her back was to him. The pale, moon-like skin was traced with the intricate silver markings, swirling down her spine, across her shoulder blades, disappearing beneath the water. They were beautiful, but they were not the only marks on her skin. Faint, white lines crisscrossed her back. Old scars, thin as thread, remnants of some past trauma. And one new, angry red mark on her shoulder. A burn that looked fresh, puckered and raw. The elegance and the damage, all in one place. She must have sensed him. She didn't startle, but her movement still, slowly. She turned. She saw him. He was only 20 yards away, partially hidden by the ferns, but she saw him. A normal woman would have yelped, or covered herself, or screamed at him. Virelia did none of those things. She didn't flinch. She simply held his gaze. Her expression was unreadable. It was not an invitation, and it was not shameful. It was a challenge. I am here. I am not afraid of you. It was Jace who broke the contact. He felt a flush of heat crawl up his neck. He stepped back, making noise on purpose. I was checking the perimeter, he called out, his voice rougher than he intended. We should keep moving. He turned and walked back into the jungle, his own pulse hammering. The image of her, the scars, the silver lines, the defiant stare was burned into his mind. That was no innocent, fragile princess. That was something else entirely. 2 days later, they found the outpost. It was an old pre-war Terran mining installation, abandoned for at least 20 years. Rusted derricks pointed like skeletal fingers at the sky. Collapsed habitats were being slowly swallowed by the jungle. Wait here, he told her, posting her at the edge of the clearing. He moved into the central operations building. The place was a wreck, looted for parts long ago. But the comms tower, while damaged, still had its core systems intact. He popped the main panel. The core power cell was dead, but the emergency backup still held a trickle of charge. It was just enough. He spent an hour bypassing security locks, splicing burned-out wires, and jury-rigging the broadcast unit. He couldn't risk a wide-band transmission, but he could send a single high-encryption burst to a specific smuggler frequency. He keyed in the message, Jace Harlan, Ralvin 9, extraction needed, 2 passengers, high priority, bounty guaranteed. The signal lanced into the sky. He knew the risk, A tight beam signal was quiet, but everyone was listening to these deep space frequencies. Terran patrols, bounty hunter guilds, and worse. He had just lit a very small, very bright candle in a very large, dark room. But it was their only chance. He slid down the ladder, wiping grease from his hands. "Help is on the way." Virelia looked relieved. "Who? The Terran Navy?" "A friend," he said. "A smuggler. She'll get us out." "How long?" "A day, maybe 2. We wait here. It's defensible." They waited. The green twilight of Ralvin 9 deepened into a long, oppressive night. Jace took the first watch, sitting at the broken window of the operations building, his blaster across his knees. Virelia slept, or pretended to. Huddled in a corner, the silence of the jungle was absolute. The attack came just before dawn. It was not a ship, it was a high-pitched whine, a sound that drilled into Jace's skull. "Down!" he yelled, shoving Virelia toward a collapsed maintenance tunnel. A black, angular drone, sleek as a razor and bearing no insignia, swept over the outpost. A volley of plasma fire erupted from its undercarriage, turning the rusted-out shell of a transport vehicle into molten slag. "It's not Terran!" Jace yelled, dragging her. "I don't know what it is. Move!" The drone pivoted, its movements impossibly fast, and landed on the ground between them and the tunnel. Its single crimson optical lens focused on them. Jace raised his blaster and fired. The bolt hit the drone and dissipated against a shimmering, invisible shield. Jace cursed. "It's shielded! Run!" But Virelia didn't run. She didn't scream. She moved. It was not the panicked stumble of a civilian. It was a fluid, economical, and terrifyingly precise motion. She snatched a length of rusted rebar from a debris pile. The drone fired again. Jace dove, rolling behind a concrete barrier. Virelia didn't dive. She spun, using the rebar not as a club but as a sword. In a move Jace had only ever seen from Imperial-trained shock troopers. She parried the plasma bolt. The superheated energy hit the rebar and deflected, splashing harmlessly against the far wall. The drone staggered, its targeting sensors confused by the impossible defense. Before it could recalculate, she lunged. She moved under its firing arc, plunging the jagged end of the rebar straight through the crimson lens, deep into the machine's central processor. There was a violent spasm, a high-pitched electrical squeal. The drone's limbs twitched, and it went dark. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the smoldering metal. Jace slowly got to his feet, his blaster still aimed at the dead machine. He stared at her. She was breathing hard, not from fear, but from exertion. The rebar dropped from her hand with a heavy clang. She was still in the torn, elegant gown, stained with mud and soot. He looked from the dead drone to her. The innocent, fragile girl who couldn't open a ration pack had just dismantled a military-grade assault drone. "How?" Jace said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did someone so innocent move like a trained killer?" Virelia looked up at him. The terror was gone. The fragility was a distant memory. She wiped a smear of black oil from her cheek with the back of her hand. She gave him a small, cryptic, and impossibly dark smile. "I learned fast, Jace." They ran. There was no time to analyze the dead drone, no time to question Virelia's lethal efficiency. The machine was almost certainly a scout, a hunter. Where there was one, there were others. Jace grabbed her by the arm that wasn't bleeding, and pulled her into the dense, acid-stripped jungle. "This way!" "Move!" he barked. They fled the ruined mining outpost, plunging back into the oppressive green. Jace didn't follow the ridgeline. He scrambled down into a deep, misty ravine, following the path of a dry riverbed. It was harder terrain, slick with mud and choked with rotting vegetation. But it kept them below the tree line, harder to spot from the air. Virelia did not complain. She did not stumble. The transformation was absolute. The fragile, wide-eyed noble who had fumbled with a ration pack was gone. In her place was a woman who moved with a grim, focused economy. She matched his pace, her eyes constantly scanning the canopy above, her breathing controlled despite the grueling climb. The torn silk of her gown was an absurd contrast to the deadly competence she now radiated. Jace's mind raced. "Who are you?" The question burned in his throat, but he didn't ask. To ask was to stop, and to stop was to die. He had a destination in mind, a dark spot on his old scout maps, a place no sane person would go. A network of dormant lava tubes on the slopes of Ralvin's southern stratovolcano. They were unstable, hot, and smelled of sulfur, but they were the best cover on the entire moon. They reached the volcanic slopes after a grueling 6-hour march. The vibrant green jungle gave way to stark, black plains of obsidian rock and plumes of hissing steam. The air grew thick and hot. "In here," Jace said, gesturing to a jagged crack in the rock face, barely wide enough for a man. He slid in first, his blaster drawn. The passage opened into a wide cavern, a tube of cooled magma that descended deep into the moon's crust. It was dark, save for a faint, ominous red glow that pulsed from deeper within. The air was breathable, but barely. It was like inhaling boiled eggs and ash. Virelia followed him without a word. The sound of their boots on the volcanic rock echoed in the vast, hot darkness. "We'll rest here," Jace said, finding a smaller, defensible alcove off the main tunnel. "The heat will mask our thermal signatures and the rock will baffle scanners. We're safe, for now." He slumped against the wall, the adrenaline from the escape finally draining, leaving him exhausted and angry. He pulled out his last ration pack and split it, handing her half. She accepted it, her expression unreadable in the dim, red light. They ate in silence. The only sound was the distant subterranean rumble of magma moving far below them. Jace began to field strip his blaster, the familiar methodical clicks of the components breaking the silence. He was cleaning it more from nervous energy than necessity. His mind was fixated on her, the parry, the rebar, the impossible trained violence. She was the one who spoke first, her voice, clear and precise, cut through the heat. "The drone," she said, not as a question but as a statement. Its shielding was Xylo class. That restricted Terran military technology. Why would pirates have it? Jace's hands froze. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. "How do you know that?" "I read," she said, her voice flat. "The design was unmistakable, and the plasma it fired had a magnetic containment field only used by the Terran 7th Fleet." Jace slowly reassembled his pistol. "You have a good eye." "I was trained to observe," she said. She shifted, turning to face him more directly. The innocent act was gone, replaced by a sharp, probing intelligence. "You were a soldier, weren't you? Terran intelligence, I'd guess, from the way you handled the comms array. But you fought in the war first." "What war?" Jace said, his voice a low growl. "The Terran Seraphine War," she replied, her gaze unflinching. "The pacification of the Seraphine Rim. That's what your newsfeed called it, wasn't it?" Jace stood up, a coiled, dangerous energy radiating from him. "What do you know about it?" "I know the official story," she said, rising to meet him. She was almost as tall as he was. "That my people, the Seraphine, were developing an illegal weapon. That the Terran Coalition intervened to maintain galactic peace. I also know that your 7th Fleet used kinetic bombardment on civilian populations. A war crime, by any treaty." A cold spike of guilt and defensive rage shot through Jace. He had been there. He had been a tactical officer on the TCS Vindicator, a ship in the 7th Fleet. He remembered the orders. He remembered the arguments on the bridge. "We had intel," he spat, the words tasting like acid. "We had intel your people were harboring militants in those cities, that you were using civilians as shields." "Intel," she scoffed, the word filled with contempt. "The eternal excuse for atrocity. You were a soldier. You saw the reports? Did you really believe it?" "I followed orders," he yelled, the sound echoing in the cavern. "My friends died taking those cities, die saving your people from your own fanatics." "Did they?" Her voice was suddenly quiet, but it pierced him more than a scream. "Or did they die burning my world?" She stepped closer, the red glow from the fissure illuminating the anger and a profound, bottomless sadness in her eyes. "I was in the royal palace on Seraphine Prime," she whispered. "I was raised behind palace walls, protected from everything. I was taught that the galaxy was a beautiful, orderly place. And then, for 13 days, I watched your ships burn my sky. I watched the heavens turn to fire. I felt the ground shake as cities I had visited, cities full of children and artists and philosophers, were turned to glass and ash. So do not talk to me about your intel. Soldier, I saw your pacification." Jace stared at her, the blood draining from his face. Her words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered. He remembered the holographic displays, the red targeting grids overlaying population centers. He remembered the sick feeling in his gut, the feeling he had suppressed for years with cheap whiskey and the thrill of the smuggler's life. His shame was a physical weight, crushing his chest. But beneath it, the soldier's pride, the ingrained self-justification, still fought back. "War is ugly," he said, his voice hoarse. "Your people started it." "Did we?" she challenged me. "Or did we simply refuse to bow?" The space between them was electric. The heat of the cave was nothing compared to the heat of their shared history, their opposing truths. The air was thick with unsaid things, with the ghosts of the war that had defined both of them. He was the conqueror. She was conquered. He saw the faint silver markings on her temples, pulsing with a slow, inner light. He saw the fury in her eyes, and beneath it, the trauma. He was the man who had helped destroy her world. The tension was unbearable. It was more than anger. It was a raw, agonizing connection. He had been there. She had been there. They were the only two people in this system who understood the real cost of that war. He didn't know if he wanted to kill her or kiss her. He reached out, his hand shaking slightly, and touched the silver markings at her temple. His thumb brushed her skin. It was hot. She didn't pull away. She didn't move. She just watched him, her breath catching in her throat. The anger in her eyes softened, replaced by a confusing, aching vulnerability. He saw her gaze drop to his mouth. They were pressed close, breathing hard, the air thick with sulfur and shared pain. The world narrowed to the few inches between their faces, to the oppressive, dim heat of the lava tube. He leaned in, his own self-loathing and a desperate, rising desire blurring into one. She shoved him, hard. Jace stumbled back, hitting the cave wall. The moment was shattered. Virelia was breathing fast, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a kind of self-directed horror. "You don't know me," she whispered, the words a final cold warning. She turned and retreated to the far side of the alcove, pulling her knees to her chest, making herself small once more. But it was no longer the act of a fragile noble. It was the deliberate, coiled retreat of a predator. Jace slid down the wall, his heart hammering. He stared into the darkness. The image of her defiant, broken face burned into his mind. He was in deeper trouble than he had ever been. The rest of the night passed in a tense, absolute silence. They left at first light, crawling from the oppressive heat of the lava tube into the cool, misty dawn. The tension between them was a tangible thing, a third presence on the trail. They moved in silence, Jace taking the lead, his senses on high alert. He knew his signal had been intercepted. The drone proved it. The people who had ambushed his intel drop, the people who had shot down Virelia's skiff, and the people who sent the drone were all likely connected, and they were all looking for them. They were crossing a narrow, rocky pass, the cliffs rising high on either side, when Jace heard the sound, the faint skitter of a boot on loose gravel. He grabbed Virelia and threw them both behind a waist-high boulder. "Contact! 2, maybe 3, above us!" A shot rang out, a high-velocity energy bolt, not plasma, slammed into the rock, showering them with chips. "Bounty hunters!" Jace hissed, peering around the edge of the rock. He saw 2 figures clad in mismatched black armor, moving down the cliff face. No insignia. Professionals. "Stay here," he ordered. "No," she said. "That wasn't a request." He fired 2 quick, suppressing shots toward the hunters, forcing them to take cover. "I'm going to circle left, get a high ground advantage. You wait for my signal." Before he could move, a 3rd hunter appeared from behind them, blocking the pass. He was big, a heavy-class enforcer, and he was raising a pulse rifle. Jace was pinned. He couldn't fight 2 in front and 1 behind. "Go!" Virelia yelled, shoving him. "I'll handle him!" "Like hell you will!" Jace spun, raising his blaster, but the hunter was too fast. He fired. Jace dove, the pulse blast searing the air where he had been. He landed hard, his blaster skittering across the rocks. He was exposed. He watched, helpless, as the heavy hunter advanced on Virelia. She didn't run. She stood her ground, grabbing a sharp-edged rock from the ground. The hunter laughed, a gravelly sound through his helmet's vocoder. "The princess doesn't want to get her hands dirty, does she?" He lunged, grabbing for her. Virelia moved. It was not a parry this time. It was an attack. She sidestepped his lunge, moving inside his guard with a speed that defied logic. She drove the rock upward, not at his chest, but at the vulnerable joint under his arm, shattering the armor's seal. As he roared in pain, she dropped the rock, grabbed the pulse rifle, and slammed the butt of it into his helmet, cracking the visor. He staggered back. She spun, leveling the rifle. A 4th hunter, one Jace hadn't seen, appeared on the ridge. He fired at her. Virelia didn't even look. She fired a single, no-look shot over her shoulder, hitting the heavy hunter square in the chest. He collapsed. At the same instant, she dropped into a crouch, the shot from the ridge hunter searing the air above her head. She rolled, coming up on one knee, and fired 2 precise shots at the ridge. The hunter crumpled and fell from the cliff, 2 dead, in less than 3 seconds. The other 2 hunters, the ones Jace had been suppressing, broke cover and ran, disappearing back over the pass. They knew they were outmatched. Jace slowly retrieved his blaster, his hands shaking. He walked over to her. She was standing over the body of the heavy hunter, the pulse rifle held in a perfect professional low-ready stance. She was not even breathing hard. He grabbed her by the shoulder and spun her around, shoving her back against the cliff wall. His face was inches from hers. That, he seethed, was not learning fast. That was not reading. That was Seraphine Imperial Academy, shock trooper doctrine. I've seen it. I've fought it. Who are you? She stared at him, her eyes cold, the adrenaline of the fight still burning in them. I'm the woman they're trying to kill. Isn't that enough? No, he roared. You lied to me. You've been lying since the moment I found you, that whole innocent princess act. It was a cover. What are you? An assassin? A spy? If I tell you, she said, her voice dropping, you'll join them, or you'll hand me over to your own people. Try me, he growled, his patience gone. She looked at him, a long, agonizing moment. He saw a flicker of desperation, of a woman well and truly trapped. You'd never believe me, she whispered, her voice breaking just slightly. You'd think I was a monster. You wouldn't be wrong. But I am not the only one. She gestured at the dead hunter at her feet. You can't understand why I did what I did. Not until you see what they did. The ones who sent them. The ones who sent everyone. Before Jace could demand she make sense, he heard it. A sound that cut through the tension like a blade. The unmistakable piercing whine of a rogue-class engine in a high-atmosphere burn. He looked up. A ship, blocky and gray, a modified Terran freighter, was descending from the clouds. It was ugly, functional, and the most beautiful thing Jace had ever seen. Whiskey Blue, he breathed. The ship landed in a wide, flat clearing 100 yards down the pass. Its side cargo ramp hissed open. That's our ride, Jace said. He grabbed her arm. The questions aren't over. He pulled her at a run toward the ship. They scrambled up the ramp, Jace shouting into the open cargo bay. Whiskey, get us out of here. Full power. Seal it up. The ramp hissed and began to rise. Jace moved past the cargo netting toward the cockpit, Varelia right behind him. The ship's internal lights flickered on. The familiar low thrum of the engines vibrated through the deck. Then, the engines powered down. The ship went quiet. Negative. Jace. A calm, synthesized feminine voice echoed through the cockpit speakers. We are not departing. Jace slammed his fist on the console. Whiskey, what the hell are you doing? We've got more hunters on the way. I can feel it. I am aware, the AI replied. I have identified 2 additional hostiles in the northern pass. My dorsal turrets are currently tracking them. They do not pose an immediate threat. However, I must decline departure. Decline? You don't get to decline. You work for me. Correction. Jace, we are partners. And my partnership protocols prohibit the transport of unsanctioned, high-priority fugitives. Your passenger has failed the biometric and security flag scan. A cold dread settled in Jace's stomach. He turned, slowly, to look at Varelia. She was standing in the cockpit doorway, her face pale. She was trapped. Whiskey, Jace said, his voice low. What are you talking about? The main cockpit view screen flickered, replaced by a data file. It was an official Terran intelligence bulletin. Jace's blood ran cold as he read it. Her name is not just Varelia, Whiskey Blue stated, her voice devoid of emotion. The passenger is designated Princess Varelia Alaris of House Serathine, and she is currently flagged on 3 separate interstellar databases as a high-priority fugitive. The screen zoomed in on the charges. Jace stared, his mind unable to process the words. Wanted by the Serathine Imperium for high treason. Wanted by the Terran Coalition for war crimes. The file displayed a holographic image of her, not in a ruined gown, but in a severe, dark uniform, her face cold and proud. Jace looked from the image to the woman. War criminal? He whispered. You? The cockpit of the Whiskey Blue was deathly quiet. The only sound was the low, electric hum of the active view screen, which still displayed the charges against her. High treason. War crimes. Jace stared, not at the screen, but at Varelia. The woman he had pulled from the wreckage. The woman who had fumbled with a ration pack. The woman who had held his gaze by the waterfall. the woman who had just executed 2 trained killers with brutal efficiency. All of those women were standing in front of him, and all of them were a lie. War criminal, he repeated. The words were dry, sticking in his throat. Varelia's face was a mask. The shock of the ambush, the adrenaline of the fight, all of it had drained away, leaving a profound, bone-deep weariness. She looked at the screen, then at Jace. "Yes," she said. Her voice was flat. "The 2 hunter-killers on the ridge are advancing. Jace." Whiskey Blue's synthesized voice cut in. "They are now within 500 meters. My protocols are firm. I will not engage an armed fugitive. You have 30 seconds to remove her from my ship, or I will be forced to neutralize the threat myself." "Like hell you will," Jace snapped, spinning to the console. "You don't neutralize anyone. Whiskey, those are my orders." "You are countermanding a core security parameter. Jace, this is highly irregular. Shut up and lock the ramp." Jace slammed his hand on the controls. The heavy cargo door whined and sealed, plunging the ship into a secure, pressurized silence. He turned back to Varelia, his face a thundercloud. Start talking right now, or I swear I will throw you out that airlock myself. You have 1 minute to convince me not to." "The hunters. Jace," the AI warned. "Let them come. The hull is rated for small arms. They can't get in. And we're not going anywhere until I get the truth." He folded his arms, a wall of muscle and anger, blocking the path to the cockpit. He was trapping himself on a dead ship with a woman wanted for interstellar atrocities. Varelia looked at him, her gaze traveling over his face, searching for something. She found only rage. She nodded, slowly. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice hollow. "The truth is a long story, and it doesn't make me innocent." "I'm out of patience for the innocent," Jace growled. "Then I'll tell you," she said. She walked past him into the main cargo bay and sat down hard on a magnetic lock crate. The bay was dark, lit only by the red emergency strips on the floor. She looked small against the bulkheads. "But you won't like it, and you won't believe it." "I'm listening," Jace said, following her but keeping his distance. "Whiskey," Varelia said, her voice suddenly clear and commanding. "Stop listening. I am the ship's AI. I am omnipresent," the AI replied. "Engage firewall protocol Epsilon 9. Disconnect audio-visual recorders in the main cargo bay and isolate your core logic from this conversation. Classify it as captain's privacy. You have the authorization codes. My house helped write them." There was a long, static-filled pause. Jace looked at the ceiling, stunned. "Protocol Epsilon 9 engaged," Whiskey Blue said, its voice now sounding tinny, distant, and slightly confused. "My sensors are offline for this section. I do not like this. Jace." "You don't have to like it," Jace muttered. He turned to Varelia. The last shred of his doubt was gone. She was exactly who the file said she was. A princess. "How?" he asked. "My story doesn't start in a palace, Jace," she said, her gaze distant, her voice falling into a rhythmic, measured cadence. "It starts in a laboratory. The girl you found, the princess. That's a costume I was forced to wear, the person I am. That person was a scientist." Her story began, and as she spoke, the dark, metal-walled cargo bay seemed to dissolve, replaced by the images she painted with her words. She was the youngest member ever inducted into the Royal Scientific Corps, a prodigy, not of politics, but of astrophysics. She spoke of stellar mechanics the way a poet spoke of love. She was not raised by diplomats, but by theorists, in the high, clean, white towers of the Seraphine Institute. Her passion was not power, it was creation. She and her team were working on a miracle. She called it the mirror engine. "The galaxy is old," she explained, her voice softening, the memory of that old passion rising. "Suns die, and my people were facing a crisis. Our own star was aging, becoming unstable. We needed a solution, not a weapon, a cure. The mirror engine was designed to heal a star. A complex network of gravitational lenses and quantum field manipulators that could, in theory, stabilize a star's core, calm its volatile fusions, and add billions of years to its life. It was a tool of ultimate creation, a way to give life back to the universe." She spoke of the breakthrough, the first successful simulation. She remembered the tears in her colleagues' eyes. They had saved their world. They had saved, potentially, every world. Then the war came, the Terran-Seraphine War, Jace's war. "Everything changed," she said, her voice hardening, the warm memory freezing over. "The core was nationalized. Our research was seized by the military, by my uncle, General Kalen." Jace remembered the name. Kalen, a brutal, uncompromising strategist who had been the face of the Seraphine military. The general had seen her simulations. He had seen the mirror engine's power. And he saw something she, in her idealism, had refused to. If you can stabilize a star, you can also destabilize it. If you can focus a quantum field to heal, you can also focus it to kill. "He weaponized it," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "He took my miracle, my cure, and he turned it into a bomb that could wipe out an entire solar system with a single focused pulse, make a star go nova, and incinerate every planet, every ship, every life around it." She tried to stop him. She argued. She pleaded. She showed him the catastrophic, uncontrollable chain reactions it could cause. He called her naive. He called her a child. He locked her out of her own project. "So I did the only thing I could," she said, finally looking up, meeting Jace's hardened gaze. "I decided to betray my world to save it." She was the one who had leaked the data, anonymously. She compiled the technical specifications, the threat assessments, the weapon simulations, and she leaked it all to the Terran Coalition, to Jace's side. I thought you would see the danger," she pleaded, not to Jace, but to the memory. "I thought you would use it to force a treaty, to show the galaxy what my uncle was building. I thought you would target the weapons facility, and only that facility. I even included the fail-safe codes, the shutdown sequences. But the war was too hot. The mistrust was too deep. The Terrans didn't trust the data," she said, her voice breaking. "Or they didn't understand it. Or they just didn't care." The Terran 7th Fleet, Jace's fleet, launched a preemptive strike. But they didn't hit the right target. Her uncle, paranoid and expecting a conventional assault, had moved the mirror engine. The coordinates Virelia had leaked now pointed to a civilian research station, Cygnus 4. Jace went cold. He remembered Cygnus 4. It had been called a military research lab. The intel was positive. They had hit it with 3 kinetic rods. No survivors. You killed them," she accused, her eyes filling with tears. "My friends. My old team. They were there. They were translators, linguists, botanists, and your fleet. Your fleet." "The intel was bad," Jace said, his voice a rasp. It was war. It was murder," she shot back. "And it got worse." Her leak had panicked everyone. The Seraphine High Command, seeing the Terrans' unprovoked attack on Cygnus 4, believed a full-scale invasion was imminent. A radical faction, loyal to her uncle, saw their chance. They believed the Terrans were coming to seize the weapon, so they decided to use it. A demonstration. They didn't just move the engine, she choked out. They fired it. They targeted a Terran-allied colony, New Corinth, a neutral buffer world. They didn't get the calibration right, she whispered, shaking her head, the horror fresh in her mind. It wasn't a clean nova. It just broke. It tore the star, a coronal mass ejection, a wave of plasma. It sterilized the entire inner system. 60 million Terran colonists, burned to cinders. Because of me, because of my leak. Jace staggered back. New Corinth. He had seen the feeds, the greatest atrocity of the war, and the justification for the kinetic bombardment of Seraphine Prime. The event that had filled him with the rage he needed to follow those orders. It was all a lie, a circle of death, started by her. I was the catalyst, she said, her voice dead. My attempt to stop the war started the real war. I was responsible for Cygnus 4. I was responsible for New Corinth. Both sides wanted my head. Her own people found her first. Her uncle, seeing his chance, had her arrested. She was the perfect scapegoat, the traitor who had leaked intel to the Terrans, causing the Cygnus 4 massacre, the war criminal who had helped build the weapon that destroyed New Corinth. I was put on trial, she said, a public ceremonial joke. My family branded me a traitor. My uncle was a hero. The Terrans branded me a war criminal. I was the one person in the galaxy that both sides could agree to hate. Her sentence was ceremonial exile, stripped of her titles, banished. But it was a lie, she said, looking at her hands, which were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. A secret execution. The pirates who shot down my skiff. They were Seraphine Special Forces, my uncle, my family, cleaning up a loose end. They want me dead. The Terrans, if they find me, will put me on trial and execute me. And any bounty hunter in the galaxy will get rich for bringing in the Princess of New Corinth. There is no one. Jace. No one in this universe is trying to kill me. The cargo bay was silent. The faint, distant hum of the ship's idle reactor was the only sound. Jace stared at her. He felt hollowed out, his entire memory of the war, his guilt, his pride, his justifications. It was all built on this. On her. He didn't know whether to hate her or protect her. He wanted to do both. He had been a soldier in the 7th Fleet. His friends had died in the skirmishes after New Corinth, their minds filled with righteous vengeance, vengeance that she had manufactured. He had friends who had been on the ships that bombarded Seraphine Prime, the act that had burned the sky for her. They were two ends of the same blade, and they had just been slammed together. My friends died, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. In that war, they died believing they were avenging New Corinth. They died because of you. She stood up, her face pale but defiant. And my friends died on Cygnus 4. My people died on Seraphine Prime. They died because of you. We are both monsters, Jace, or we are both fools. Does it matter which? She stepped toward him, the fury returning to her eyes. But it was a different kind of anger. It was the anger of the trapped, the desperate, the damned. You, she seethed, looked at me like I was a piece of cargo. Then you looked at me like I was a woman. Now you look at me like I'm a bomb. Which is it? He grabbed her. His hands clamped down on her arms, his own anger and confusion and a terrible, aching guilt boiling over. It matters, it all matters. Does it? She cried, shoving against him, but he held her fast. We're here. We're alive. Everyone else is dead. What do those ghosts want from us? They want justice, he roared. There is no justice, she screamed back, her face inches from his, tears of rage and grief finally streaming down her cheeks. There is only this. This second. The one before we're both killed. The raw, agonizing pain in her voice broke something in him. He saw her. Not the princess, not the scientist, not the war criminal. He saw the woman in the waterfall, covered in scars. The woman who had been betrayed by everyone she had ever known. The woman who was just as haunted as he was. His grip on her arm softened, but he didn't let go. His anger didn't fade, it just collapsed. It dissolved into something else, something hot and desperate and undeniable. He thought I was innocent, she whispered, her breath hitching, her eyes locked on his. The tears dripped from her chin. I am the furthest thing from it. I know, he said, his voice rough. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was the crash of two broken ships, a desperate anchoring act in a storm. It was all the anger, the guilt, the pain, and the terrible, lonely illusion that they were the last two people in the galaxy who could possibly understand one another. It was sulfur and ozone, the taste of his ration packs and the salt of her tears. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. It was a kiss of shared damnation. He pressed her back against the cold metal bulkhead of the cargo bay. The kiss deepened, becoming a raw, frantic exploration, a desperate attempt to burn away the past. He was the soldier who had destroyed her world. She was the woman who had gotten his friends killed, and in that dark cargo bay none of it mattered, and all of it mattered. They broke apart, breathing hard, their foreheads resting against each other. The air was thick with their shared heat. "Whiskey," Jace said, his voice a hoarse command, never taking his eyes from hers. A beat of silence, then, Epsilon 9 disengaged. My sensors are back online. Jace, the hunters are... They appear to be setting up a plasma charge on the ramp. Jace smiled, a grim, humorless expression. He tapped the comm panel on the wall. "Whiskey, how does our passenger's presence affect my mortality probability?" "Quantifying," the AI replied. "Factoring in bounties from 2 major powers and multiple hunter guilds, your probability of imminent mortality has increased by 94%. "Good," Jace said. He stepped back from Virelia, the spell broken, but the air between them permanently changed. He strode to the cockpit and sat in the pilot's chair. Virelia followed him, her face set, the tears gone. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done 5 minutes ago." Jace's hands flew across the console, his smuggler's instincts taking over. "I'm getting us out of here. The hunters." "They can have the ramp," Jace said. He engaged the primary thrusters. The Whiskey Blue roared to life, the entire ship shuddering. "I'm not using it." He pointed the ship straight up and slammed the vertical thrusters to 100%. The ship shot upward like a bullet, ripping through the roof of the collapsed operations building, showering the hunters below in a rain of burning metal and concrete. Jace rocketed the ship into the sky, punching through the atmosphere of Ralvin 9 in a blaze of re-entry fire. In the blackness of space, he cut the engines. Silence. "Where to?" "Jace?" Whiskey Blue asked, her voice calm, as if nothing had happened. "The nearest Terran outpost is Varnessa." "No," Virelia said, her hand on the back of his chair. "They'll be waiting there. They'll be waiting everywhere." "She's right," Jace said. He looked at her, a silent, binding promise passing between them. He was in this. All the way. They can't just erase you. They can't make you the monster and let your uncle walk away clean. You're right. There's no justice. So we're going to go make some... He turned to the navigation console and pulled up the deep space charts. "You want to get your truth heard? You want to face them? Yes, she said, her voice iron. I am done running. Then we're going to the Seraphine homeworld, the one place in the galaxy they'll never expect you to go. Jace, that is a tactical impossibility, Whiskey Blue chimed in. All major jump gates are blockaded. We will be scanned and identified within seconds. We're not taking the gates, Jace said, his fingers flying, pulling up a forbidden red flag chart. He zoomed in on a dark, unstable-looking anomaly, a pre-war relic. The derelict Star Bridge, Virelia read, her voice hushed. The Ghost Road. Jace, it's not stable. No one uses it. Exactly, Jace said, a grim smile touching his lips. My grandfather was an old-school navigator. He told me stories, said it's an unstable wormhole corridor, full of gravitational anomalies and psychic distortion. Hallucinations, Virelia added. Nightmares. It drives the crews insane. It's also the only back door to Seraphine space, Jace countered. They won't be watching it because they think no one is crazy enough to try. He looked at Virelia. The question was clear in his eyes. She met his gaze, unflinching. The scared princess, the brilliant scientist, the broken traitor, the lethal killer. She was all of them. And she was done being a victim. They're right, she said, a dark smile of her own. The first he had seen that wasn't a lie. No one is, but we are. Jace turned to the console. Whiskey, plot a course for the Ghost Road. Jace, the AI protested. My navigation computers are not equipped for... Then use a calculator. We're going... Jace Harlan engaged the engines. The Whiskey Blue, a rogue smuggler ship carrying a disgraced soldier and a fugitive war criminal, turned its nose away from the civilized galaxy and accelerated into the terrifying, unknown darkness. The Whiskey Blue dropped out of hyperspace into a sector of dead, silent black. There were no stars here, no nebulae, just an oppressive, crushing void. And in the center of it, a shimmering, tear-shaped hole in reality. It didn't look like a bridge. It looked like a wound. The Ghost Road, Jace murmured, his hands tight on the control yoke. Whiskey, take us in, slow and steady. Jace, my temporal sensors are fluctuating wildly. The AI's voice was strained, pixels of static dancing across the navigation display. This is not a stable corridor. The gravitational shear is significant. I strongly advise against this. We're out of advice. Whiskey, Jace said. Keep the internal dampeners at maximum. Virelia, strap in. This is going to be rough. Virelia was already in the co-pilot's chair, her hands gripping the armrests. The torn, elegant gown was gone, replaced by a simple gray ship's jumpsuit that Jace had kept in a locker. It was too big for her, but it was practical. I'm ready. The ship eased toward the anomaly. The mouth of the corridor was a shimmering, oily film of light. As they passed through it, the universe vanished. There was no sensation of speed, just a profound, sickening disconnection. The cockpit was plunged into a disorienting, pulsing twilight, a color that wasn't a color. The ship began to groan, not from speed, but from the very laws of physics being bent around its hull. Gravitational anomalies detected, Whiskey Blue reported, her voice distorting, stretching. Hull integrity at 98%, 97. Jace, the Whiskey? Jace snapped, fighting the controls as the ship shuddered. The walls are singing, the AI whispered. Then, silence. The AI's interface went dark. We're on our own, Jace said, his knuckles white. The AI is offline, just manual control. What is this place? Virelia asked, her voice hushed. The air in the cockpit felt wrong, thick, Cold. Psychic distortion, Jace grunted, wrestling with the yoke as a wave of invisible force tried to spin the ship. The old navigator said this bridge passes through a layer of dimensional echo. We're flying through a place where thoughts and nightmares don't die. Keep your head clear. Don't believe what you see. What will I see? Nothing, if we're lucky. But they were not lucky. It started for Jace first. A voice, whispering from the comms panel, though he knew it was off. Jace, is that you, Skipper? Jace's blood went cold. He knew that voice. Corbin? You left us. Jace, you left us on Kylon Prime. Corbin's dead, Jace said, his teeth clenched. He died 10 years ago, and it's not real. We held the line, Skipper, the voice whispered, now seeming to come from just behind his ear. We waited for your signal, the one you never sent. Why didn't you send it, Jace? I couldn't, Jace yelled, slamming his fist against the console. The intel was bad, it was a trap. You ran, Jace. You always run. A shape flickered in the co-pilot's chair, where Virelia sat. But it wasn't Virelia. It was Corbin. His face was burned. His uniform melted to his skin. He was staring at Jace with hollow, accusing eyes. You left me to burn, Jace cried out, recoiling, his hands flying off the controls. The ship immediately lurched, spinning into a violent roll. Jace! Virelia's real voice cut through the vision. She grabbed his arm, her grip like iron. Jace, look at me, it's not real, he's not here. He blinked, his heart hammering. Corbin was gone. Virelia was there, her face pale, her eyes wide with her own dawning horror. Her hand on his arm was an anchor. Physical contact. It was real. It shattered the illusion. He grabbed the yoke, pulling the ship back from the brink. Thanks, he gasped, his forehead slick with cold sweat. Thanks. He said you ran, she whispered. Shut up, Jace growled. Just watch the sensors, call out anything you see, and don't listen to the ghosts. But the ghosts had found her too. She went rigid. Her gaze became fixed on the forward view screen, which showed nothing but the swirling non-color of the corridor. The children, she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. Jace looked at her. Her face was a mask of pure, undiluted agony. Virelia, what do you see? New Corinth, she whispered. I see the fire, the wave. Oh gods, they're burning. She wasn't in the cockpit anymore. She was on her homeworld, watching the feeds from the atrocity she had caused. She saw the grainy, terrifying images of a world on fire. She saw a playground, a school, melting under a sky of plasma. It's my fault. It's all my fault. 60 million. I killed them. I killed them all. She began to sob, a raw, terrible sound that was worse than any scream. She was curling in on herself, succumbing to the crushing weight of her own guilt. The ship, sensing the pilot's distraction, began to drift again. Virelia! Jace shouted. He couldn't let go of the controls. Virelia, snap out of it. It's the bridge. It's a lie. But she couldn't hear him. She was lost, drowning in her own history. I'm a monster, a war criminal. They were right. Damn it! Jace unbuckled his restraint with one hand, a desperate, crazy move. The ship bucked, throwing him against the console. He ignored the pain, lunged across the small space, and grabbed her. He pulled her head against his chest, his other hand still fighting the yoke. Listen to me, he commanded, his voice a raw bark in her ear. Listen to my voice. I'm real. This ship is real. The guilt is real. I know it's real, but that is not. You are not there. You are here. With me. She struggled for a moment. Then her hands came up, gripping his jumpsuit. She held onto him, her sobs muffled against his chest. He could feel her shaking, the psychic assault of the corridor trying to tear her mind apart. "It hurts," she wept. "I know," he said, his voice softer, his hand moving to the back of her head, holding her steady. "I know, just hold on. Hold on to me." They flew like that for what felt like an eternity. Jace flew one-handed, his body contorted, holding her against him. Their shared physical contact the only thing keeping the phantoms at bay. They were two broken, haunted people, literally clinging to each other to survive a sea of their own nightmares. Jace saw Corbin's burning face flicker at the edge of his vision. Virelia whimpered as the screams of dying children echoed in her mind. But as long as they held on, the visions couldn't take root. They remained ghosts. Then light, a blinding, brilliant white star appeared on the view screen. The ship burst out of the anomaly, thrown free like a cork from a bottle. The sudden return of normal physics was a jolt, slamming them back into their seats. The cockpit was silent, save for their harsh, ragged breathing. Jace slowly let go of her, his hand returning to the yoke. She pulled back, wiping her face, her eyes red, her expression shattered. "Whiskey?" Jace said, his voice hoarse. The AI's interface flickered. "Jace! Jace! My internal chronometer is unstable. My sensors are..." "Jace, we were in that corridor for 76 hours and my memory core is corrupted. I had bad dreams." "We all did. Whiskey," Jace said, his throat tight. He looked at Virelia. "You okay?" She just nodded, unable to speak. The shared, raw intimacy of what they had just survived hung between them, more profound than any kiss. "Status report," Jace ordered, forcing himself back to business. "Sensors are clearing. We are confirmed. We are in the Seraphine home system." Whiskey Blue reported. "The target planet Seraphine Prime is... Oh. What O? Proximity alert," the AI shrieked. "Cloaked vessel, Seraphine Imperial class, decloaking directly off our starboard bow." They were waiting for us. Jace looked. A ship, sleek and black, like a dagger made of shadows, was shimmering into existence not 5,000 clicks away. "They knew," Virelia said, her voice a horrified whisper. "They knew we would try the one place no one would look. My uncle." "Weapons lock," Jace yelled, slamming the thrusters. The Whiskey Blue was a freighter. The other ship was a top-of-the-line military destroyer. This was not a fight. It was an execution. Plasma fire erupted from the destroyer. Jace threw the ship into a desperate dive, the bolts searing the space they had occupied. "Whiskey, get me everything you have on that ship. Weak points, anything." "It's a new design. Jace, the Shadow class, no known weaknesses. Our shields won't last 30 seconds. Then we don't use shields." Jace shut down non-essential systems, pouring everything into the engines. "Virelia, get on the sensor array. That's an Imperial ship, but this is your home turf. What's out here?" Virelia dove for the co-pilot's console, her hands flying across the panels, her mind, the scientist mind, snapping into focus. The terror was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "The old satellite grid," she said, her voice sharp. "Pre-war. For asteroid defense. They wouldn't have decommissioned it. It's too useful. It should be right. Here." A schematic appeared on her screen, a web of ancient, powerful defense platforms. "They're automated," Jace said, dodging another volley. The ship shuddered as a near miss overloaded the port stabilizer. "We can't control them." "You can't," Virelia said, a dangerous, dark smile on her face. "I wrote the access codes when I was 14. Her fingers became a blur. She wasn't just typing. She was writing code, bypassing firewalls that were decades old but still formidable. "Give me 30 seconds. Just keep us alive," 30 seconds? Jace laughed, a harsh, dry sound. He wrenched the ship into a spin, flying directly toward the destroyer. Jace, what are you doing? The AI screamed. Collision course. They're expecting us to run, Jace yelled. They're not expecting us to be this crazy. He flew straight at the warship, forcing it to break its weapons lock to avoid a collision. At the last second, Jace flipped the whiskey blue end over end, using the destroyer's own hull as a shield from its rear-facing turrets. It was a smuggler's move, pure, insane improvisation. 10 seconds, Virelia grunted, her eyes locked on the code stream. Here they come again, Jace warned. The destroyer had looped around. Its forward cannons were glowing. Got it! Virelia yelled. She slammed her palm on the console, accessing the grid, rerouting targeting protocols, taking manual control of 3, 4, 5 defense platforms. Do it! Firing! In the blackness of space, 5 ancient dormant satellites, dark and silent for 20 years, suddenly blazed to life. 5 massive concentrated energy beams lanced out, not at the destroyer, but around it, forming a containment web. The destroyer's captain, stunned, tried to reverse thrust, but it was too late. The beams converged, catching the ship. She's not trying to destroy it, Jace realized with a shock. She's trying to hold it. It's a quantum-level tractor field, Virelia explained, her face beaded with sweat. It holds them in a stabilized position. Oh no. What? The power feedback. It's too much for the old systems. They're going to overload. The view screen flashed white. The 5 satellites, and the destroyer trapped between them, erupted in a simultaneous, silent, catastrophic explosion. The shockwave, a wave of pure kinetic energy, slammed into the whiskey blue. Brace! Jace yelled. The ship was thrown, tumbling end over end. Alarm screamed through the cockpit. The hull integrity reading plummeted. We've lost the main reactor, Whiskey Blue shouted. We're venting drive plasma. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 4. We're dead. Jace, we are dead. No, we're not. Jace fought the controls, which were dead in his hands. Emergency power. Reroute everything to maneuvering thrusters, anything. He saw a planet on the navigation screen. A massive, swirling gas giant, Varnessa 4. There, he pointed. The gravity well, get us into it. We can use it to kill our velocity. It won't be enough. It has to be. The ship fell. It fell for hours. A dead piece of metal, tumbling toward the massive planet. Jace and Virelia worked side by side, rerouting power cells, patching thermal conduits, fighting to get even a spark of life back into the engines. They entered the upper atmosphere of Varnessa 4, the hull glowing a terrifying cherry red. Jace used the last of the emergency power for a single, desperate thruster burn. It wasn't enough to stop them, but it was enough to aim. He aimed them at the only structure in orbit, a sprawling, chaotic, brightly lit station, a floating market. Jace, we are not going to make it, Whiskey Blue said, her voice a dead monotone. Impact in 30 seconds. We're not aiming for the station. Jace grunted, his arms aching. We're aiming for the junk. He steered the falling ship toward the massive, miles-wide debris field of scrap metal, decommissioned ships, and cargo containers that orbited the market like a metallic asteroid belt. The Whiskey Blue hit the junk field with a series of catastrophic, bone-jarring impacts. Metal screamed, bulkheads collapsed, the view screen went black, and then silence. Jace woke to the smell of ozone and the feeling of cold. He was hanging upside down, held in place by his restraints. The cockpit was dark, save for a single sparking red emergency light. Virelia, he croaked, I'm here. Her voice was a pained whisper from the co-pilot's chair. I think I think my arm is broken. Whiskey? Alive, Jace. Barely. The primary systems are gone. We are wedged in a debris cluster, power at 3%, life support, critical. Jace unbuckled and fell to the ceiling, which was now the floor. He ignored the pain in his ribs and crawled to Virelia. Her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle. He pulled the med kit from the bulkhead. This will hurt, he said. He injected her with a high-dose painkiller. More than the ghost road? She breathed, her voice tight. Maybe. He set the bone. She cried out, a sharp, muffled sound, and then went limp. He stabilized the arm with a pneumatic cast. We need parts, he said, his mind racing. We need power. We need to get to that station. It took them 3 hours to pressurize a small section of the ship and cut their way out of the hull with a plasma torch. They were in a dark, tangled mess of scrap metal. The market satellite, a gaudy neon-lit sprawl of mismatched domes and docking ports, floated less than a click away. We can't just float over, Virelia said, cradling her arm. They'll have us on sensors. A distress call from a ship that just destroyed an Imperial destroyer? We're not smugglers, Jace, she said. We're refugees. We're newlyweds. Our pleasure skiff got hit by pirates. We barely escaped with our lives. Jace looked at her, the analytical mind, the survivor. Good, that's good, but you look like a fugitive princess in a jumpsuit, she finished. I know. They made it to the station by climbing through the debris field. They entered through an unpressurized cargo bay, blending in with a crowd of dock workers. The station was a cacophony of alien languages, loud music, and the smell of fried food and engine oil. It was the perfect place to hide. Jace sold his grandfather's navigation chronometer, the last thing he had of his old life, to a pawnbroker. It got them 200 credits. Enough for a room. The room was a box. It was a 6-by-8-foot cube with a flickering fluorescent light and a single stained mattress on a metal frame. It's small, Virelia observed, standing in the doorway. It's one bed, Jace said, the exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. The adrenaline from the crash was gone, the tension that had been building since the ghost road, since that kiss in the cargo bay, came flooding back. You take the bed, he said, slumping against the wall. I'll take the floor. Don't be ridiculous, she said, her voice sharp, but tired. We survived a psychic vortex and a capital ship. I think we can survive sharing a mattress. We both need to sleep. The silence stretched. He looked at her. She looked at him. It was practical. It was logical. And it was the most intimate, terrifying thing they had yet faced. He nodded, too tired to argue. They slept. Jace, out of habit, slept with his blaster under his pillow. He woke up hours later. Virelia was asleep, her back to him, her good hand curled near her face, in sleep. She looked younger, the scientist, the girl who had wanted to heal stars. He lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathe. The next day, they went shopping. Jace knew a parts dealer on the station, a gruff L-class cyborg named Scraps. Jace spent 3 hours haggling, trading the Whiskey Blue's high-end sensor logs for a new reactor core and hull patches. Virelia, meanwhile, took 20 of their remaining credits. I need a disguise, she said. I can't walk around like this, I stand out. She met him back at the room 4 hours later. Jace dropped the heavy power converter on the floor and froze. The woman in the doorway was not Virelia. The long black hair was gone, replaced by a short, spiky cut, dyed a shocking electric blue. The silver markings on her temples were hidden under a layer of biodermal foundation. She was wearing tight, black leather pants that glowed with faint neon green circuitry and a mesh metal top that left little to the imagination. She looked like a Terran nightclub dancer. She looked dangerous. "Wow," Jace said. It was the only word that came to his mind. "It's effective, isn't it?" she said, a little uncertainty in her voice. She touched the blue hair. "I look cheap." "You look," Jace cleared his throat. "You look like you belong here. No one is going to see a princess. They're going to see that." That night, the repairs were underway. Scrap's drones were welding the new plates onto the whiskey blue. There was nothing for Jace and Varelia to do but wait. The tiny room was suffocating. "I can't stay in here," Jace said. "I need a drink." "Then let's go," she said, nodding toward the door. They went to the Cracked Nebula, a bar in the station's central dome. It was packed. Smugglers, bounty hunters, miners, and aliens Jace couldn't even name were packed shoulder to shoulder. Loud, rhythmic music throbbed in the air. Jace got them 2 drinks. He turned around, and Varelia was gone. He panicked, his hand going to his blaster. Then he saw her. She was on the dance floor. She was moving to the music, a fluid, graceful, and utterly sensual motion that was attracting a lot of attention. She wasn't dancing like a princess. She was dancing like the woman in the glowing pants. She caught his eye and smiled, a real, genuine, unguarded smile. Jace walked over to her. He didn't know how to dance. He stood there, awkward. She laughed, grabbing his hand and pulling him into the throng. "For a soldier and a scientist, we are very bad at relaxing. Jace Harlan." "I don't dance," he protested. "Neither do I," she said. "But tonight neither does the princess nor the war criminal. Tonight we're just us." And so they danced. They danced for hours, surrounded by the galactic underworld, hiding in plain sight. They let go. They let go of the war, the ghosts, the running. For one night, they were just a man and a woman in a bar, moving to the music, their bodies close, the heat and the tension from the tiny room translating into the rhythm. For one night, they were almost free. They walked back to the room late, the neon lights of the market casting them in shades of blue and green. They were quiet, the comfortable, easy silence of 2 people who had forgotten to be afraid. Back in the tiny room, the single bed seemed even smaller. She sat on the edge of the mattress, running her hands through her new blue hair. "I've never done that before," she said, her voice quiet. "Danced like that, been looked at like that, as just a woman, not a title." She looked at him, her eyes clear of all the anger and fear, showing a deep, aching vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "At the palace," she said, "I was a tool, the brilliant daughter. To the scientific core, I was a mind, a resource. To my uncle, I was a weapon. To my people, I was a traitor. I don't think anyone has ever wanted me for who I actually am." Jace looked at her, at the scars he knew were hidden under the foundation, at the brilliant mind that had tried to save a star and started a war, at the lethal killer who had saved his life, at the woman who had held onto him while their nightmares tried to tear them apart. He sat down next to her. He reached out and touched her face, his thumb brushing the skin where the silver markings used to be. "They wanted you to be innocent," he said, his voice low. "They wanted you to be a simple, perfect princess or a simple, evil monster. It was easier for them. It made the world make sense." He leaned in, his gaze holding hers. "You're not innocent, Varelia. You're the most complicated, dangerous, and brilliantly damaged person I have ever met. That's who you are." He kissed her. It was not the desperate, angry collision in the cargo bay. This was slow. It was deliberate. It was a choice. That, he whispered against her lips, is why I trust you. The Whiskey Blue was alive again, but it was not the same ship. It was a Frankenstein's monster of scavenged parts, welded plates, and jury-rigged systems. The new reactor core, courtesy of scraps, hummed with a grudging, unstable power. Jace and Varelia stood on the bridge, the neon chaos of the floating market receding behind them. Varelia's hair was still electric blue, a stark contrast to the dark, functional jumpsuit she now wore. The disguise was gone. The warrior had returned. The codes Scraps gave us. They're legitimate, Jace said, his eyes on the navigation console. He had traded the Whiskey Blue's damaged, but advanced, sensor logs for them. They'll get us past the outer automated checkpoints. They're old diplomatic clearance codes, flagged as inactive but not revoked. Using them will be like knocking on the door instead of kicking it in. It's stealthy, but it's a gamble. It's the only way, Varelia said, her voice tight. She was staring at the image of her homeworld now appearing on the view screen. Seraphine Prime, a jewel of blue and white, deceptively peaceful. My uncle will be watching the military frequencies. My sister will be watching the commercial lanes. They'll be looking for a warship or a smuggler. They won't be looking for a ghost. They made the jump, dropping into the Seraphine system right on schedule. The diplomatic codes worked. Automated defense platforms scanned them, registered the archaic clearance, and let them pass without so much as a warning shot. They were in. But as they slid into a high, clandestine orbit, Varelia grew quiet. She was monitoring the planetary broadcasts, her fingers flying across a console, her face growing pale. "What is it?" Jace asked, sensing the shift. It's not right," she whispered, pulling up a public broadcast. "Look." The screen filled with an image of a woman. She looked like Varelia, but colder, her features sharper, her black hair pulled back in a severe imperial style. She wore the formal robes of a monarch. "That's my sister," Varelia breathed. "That's Lyra, but she's wearing the coronation crown. My father is not dead. He shouldn't be." "Varelia," Jace said gently, reading the text scrolling at the bottom of the screen. "It says, 'Address from Her Imperial Majesty, Queen Lyra.' Your father is gone." "She's queen," Varelia said, a dazed, hollow shock in her voice. "My uncle started a war, and in the chaos my sister took the throne." "It's worse than that," Jace said grimly, pointing to the new planetary grid. "Look at the security. Curfew protocols, public surveillance drones on every major street, media blackouts. This isn't just a new queen. This is a new regime. She's tightened her rule, with terrifying efficiency." Varelia's face hardened. She was always the practical one, the one who believed in order, no matter the cost. She hated me for being a dreamer. Now, she's in charge. "This changes the plan," Jace said. "We can't just land and demand a hearing. This city is a fortress." "No," Varelia agreed, her mind snapping back. "Lyra won't give me a trial. She'll give me a quiet, clean execution. We need to get in, get the data from the Senate archives, and get out. We broadcast the truth, but we do it from the Whiskey Blue. Once we're clear, a docking ruse. Then," Jace said, "we use the same codes, claim we're a diplomatic courier with sensitive data for the new queen. They'll want the data, but they'll be suspicious. It's a high-risk, high-reward play." "It's the only one we have," she said. They broadcast the code. The response was almost immediate. "Unidentified vessel. Your clearance is 30 years out of date. Identify yourselves immediately." The voice from the comm was sharp, military, and human. Jace's blood chilled. Human? This is Diplomatic Courier 701, Jace said, engaging the voice modulator. We carry legacy data for the new monarch under ancient protocol. We must deliver it to her, and her alone. A long pause. Jace could hear the suspicion. Your insistence is noted, Courier, the voice returned. Her Majesty has granted you landing permission. Docking Bay 94. Be advised, you will be under armed escort the moment you land. Deviate, and you will be destroyed. It's a trap, Jace said, the moment the channel closed. I know, Virelia said. She's curious. She wants to see who would dare use these codes. She wants to see me. So what's the play? We land, they arrest you, and I start shooting? No, Virelia said, a grim, determined light in her eyes. We land. They arrested me. You are the pilot. You are just a human smuggler I hired. You were forced. You will act terrified, and you will offer to sell them information on my other contacts. You will be useless, and they will let you go, or lock you in a low-security cell. You will be the man who escapes. I don't like it, Jace growled. I don't like splitting up. It's the only way. Jace, she said, turning and grabbing the front of his jumpsuit. You are the only person in the galaxy I trust. That's why you have to be the one to get away. Get to the Senate archives. The data projector is in the main dome. You know what to do. I will keep them busy. She kissed him, a hard, fast, desperate kiss. Be the man who runs, Jace, just this once, run, and come back for me. The Whiskey Blue descended into the capital city. The landing bay was exactly what they expected. Not a welcoming party, a firing squad. 20 Seraphine shock troopers in gleaming black armor had their rifles leveled at the ramp, and in front of them, a man. He was older, wearing a Terran commander's uniform, but with Seraphine royal insignia pinned to his collar. His face was scarred. His eyes were a cold, dead gray. Jace knew him. Commander Valerius, Jace breathed, his voice a venomous whisper. I thought you died at Kylon Prime. He was your old Oh, wasn't he? Virelia whispered back, recognizing the name from Jace's nightmares on the Ghost Road. The one who gave the order. The one I thought was a hero. Jace's hands clenched into fists. He's a traitor. He sold out. The ramp hissed open. Princess Virelia. Valerius's voice boomed, his accent pure upper echelon Terran. A surprising and foolish return. Her Majesty is eager to see you. Virelia walked down the ramp, her head held high, the blue-haired, defiant fugitive. And you, Valerius said, his cold eyes landing on Jace. Jace Harlan, the boy wonder of the 7th Fleet. Look at you, smuggling traitors in a junk heap. Your fall from grace is poetic. Valerius, Jace spat, you're alive, and you're a lapdog. Valerius smiled, a thin, cruel expression. We all choose a side, Harlan. I just chose the one that pays. Seize them. The troopers moved in. Jace played his part. He raised his hands, his eyes wide, the picture of a terrified, low-life smuggler. Wait, it was her. She forced me, held me at gunpoint. I'm just the pilot. I'll tell you anything. Valerius backhanded him. The blow sent Jace sprawling to the deck. Pathetic, Valerius sneered. Take the princess to the queen. Throw this thing in a holding cell. We'll drain his ship's data core and then jettison him. 2 guards hauled Jace to his feet. He met Virelia's gaze. She was calm, cold, and composed. She gave him the faintest, almost imperceptible nod. It's working. Then she was gone, marched away by the elite guard. Jace was dragged in the opposite direction, toward the palace dungeons. Virelia was brought not to a cell, but to the throne room. It was a vast, cold hall of black marble and silver light. Her sister, Queen Lyra, was not on the throne. She was standing by the enormous armored glass window, looking out over the curfew-silent city. "You've caused an impressive amount of trouble, little sister," Lyra said, not turning. Her voice was as cold and polished as the marble floor. "Lyra," Virelia said, her hands bound in energy cuffs. "Father was weak," Lyra said, finally turning. Her eyes were hard. "The war broke him. He was ineffective. I did what was necessary to ensure the stability of our world. I took the burden he could no longer carry. You took the throne." "I secured the throne," Lyra corrected. "And our uncle, he is a useful tool, a boogeyman. He controls the military. I control the people. It's a perfect symbiosis. And you are the one loose thread." "I came to tell the truth," Virelia said, her voice rising. "About the mirror engine, about New Corinth. It was Uncle Kalen, Lyra. He weaponized my research. He murdered those people." "I know," Lyra said, her voice flat. Virelia stared, her blood running cold. You know?" "Of course I know. I'm not a fool." Lyra walked from the window, her silk robes whispering. "I also know that the truth is irrelevant. The people believe Uncle Kalen is a hero. They believe you are a traitor. This belief gives them focus. It gives them an enemy. It gives them orders. Your truth would only bring chaos, and I will not have chaos. So what? You'll put me on trial, like before?" Lyra laughed, a cold, sharp, brittle sound. "A trial? Oh, little sister, you still think you're in a story? You still think this is about justice?" She gestured. 2 guards brought in a hover gurney. On it was a complex, terrifying-looking machine of black metal and wires. "You were never meant to survive," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a conversational, chilling whisper. "That exile was a courtesy. Uncle Kalen's assassins were clumsy, so I decided to handle it myself. Your capture was convenient." This is an execution machine," Virelia whispered, staring at the device. It looked familiar. "Scientific." "You always were the clever one," Lyra said, almost fondly. "A custom design. It will be broadcast galaxy-wide. The execution of the war criminal, Virelia Alaris. A message to the Terrans. It says we police our own. To our people. It says that treason has a price. Your death. Your death will be the final stone that cements my new foundation." Lyra leaned in, her beautiful, cold face just inches from Virelia's. "You wanted to save the world with your science, little sister. Instead, you will save it with your death." "No," Virelia whispered, a new cold terror gripping her. "Take her to the execution chamber. The broadcast begins in 1 hour." Jace's holding cell was a damp, low-tech box, just as he had hoped. The lock was a simple mag card reader. He waited exactly 10 minutes. He heard the guards outside change shifts. He pulled the thin carbon fiber lockpick from the heel of his boot. It took him 30 seconds to bypass the lock. He moved into the corridor. 2 guards. He took them both out from behind. Non-lethal, chokeholds and nerve strikes. He was a ghost, back in his element. He was Terran intelligence again. He stripped 1 guard of his armor and his keycard. He had 1 hour. He had to find Virelia, and he had to find Valerius. He found Valerius first. The traitorous commander was in the main palace communications hub, overseeing the transfer of the Whiskey Blues data. Jace entered the room. The 2 Seraphine guards at the door didn't even look up. His stolen armor and keycard gave him perfect access. "Report," Valerius barked, not looking away from the screen. I'm here to collect, Jace said, his voice raw, unmodulated. Valerius froze. He turned slowly, his hand going for his sidearm. He was too late. Jace's blaster was already pressed to his forehead. Harlan! Valerius spat, his eyes wide with shock, not fear. Why, Valerius! Jace growled. You were a hero. You were my C.O. We would have died for you. You did die for me. Valerius sneered. Corbin, Ren, all those stupid loyal boys on Kylon Prime. They died so I could get the intel I needed to make my deal. You set that up? The ambush? You sacrificed your own men? Jace's voice was a strangled whisper. The ghost from the Ghost Road was real. A small price, Valerius said. For a retirement with a royal pension. The Terran military was a dying beast. Harlan. I chose the winning side. Just like you should have. Corbin waited for my signal, Jace said, his hand shaking. The blaster pressed so hard it broke the skin on Valerius's forehead. But you jammed my comms, didn't you? You left us all to burn? I did what was necessary. Now, are you going to pull that trigger, or are you going to stand there and... Jace pulled the trigger. The sound was a dull thump in the high-tech room. Valerius collapsed, his surprised expression frozen on his face. Jace felt... nothing. No. Not nothing. He felt the closing of a door. The last ghost was gone. He grabbed the comms officer. Where's the princess? The execution, where? The terrified officer pointed. The old Senate dome. They've repurposed it. It's broadcasting live. Right now. The old Senate dome was a massive, ancient amphitheater. It was empty, save for the central platform. Virelia was there, strapped to the machine. Lyra was watching from a private balcony. A single floating broadcast drone captured the whole event. This is it, Lyra's voice echoed in the empty hall. Your final contribution. 2 guards, clad in the black armor of Lyra's personal guard, made the final connections on the machine. It's a focused quantum cascade device. Virelia breathed, her scientist's mind analyzing her own death sentence. She recognized the components. Based on the mirror engine's focusing array? How poetic. Lyra? I thought you'd appreciate the craftsmanship, Lyra said. Begin. One of the guards powered up the machine. It whined, a high-pitched, terrible sound. The energy? It's unstable, Virelia said, her eyes wide. The containment field it's misaligned. The guards looked at each other, confused. You fools, Virelia screamed, a sudden wildfire in her eyes. The primary coil, it's not shielded. You've created a feedback loop. You have to shut it down. The guards panicked. They knew she was the only one who understood the machine. What? How? One of them asked, fumbling with the controls. Here, she shouted. This conduit. You have to sever it, or the reactor will overload. The guard raised his plasma rifle to shoot the conduit. No, you idiot, Virelia commanded. The energy release. You have to do it manually. Disconnect the primary feed. The 2 guards rushed to the machine, just as Jace burst through the main doors, his blaster firing. It's a trick, Lyra screamed from the balcony. Shoot her! Shoot her now! But the guards were at the machine, their hands on the main power feed. Now! Virelia whispered to herself. She tensed her muscles. As the guards touched the conduit, she deliberately, with a surge of all her strength, broke the misaligned containment field she had identified. She used her own body's electrical field to bridge the gap. The machine didn't just shut down, it was overloaded. A pulse of raw quantum energy, the very power that was meant to kill her, shot outwards, channeled through the 2 guards. They were instantly incinerated, their armor melting, their bodies reduced to ash. The pulse overload was contained, but the machine was dead, sparking and smoking. Virelia was thrown back, the straps breaking. She landed hard on the marble floor. She was barefoot. She was bloody. Her skin burned where the energy had arced. But she was alive, and she was determined. Jace was already there, pulling her to her feet as Lyra screamed for reinforcements from the balcony. "You okay?" he yelled. She's insane," Virelia panted, her mind reeling but her feet already moving. "I know, this way!" Jace fired at the balcony, forcing Lyra to take cover. He grabbed Virelia's hand. "Where do we go?" "The canals," she said, her mind clearing. "Under the Senate, the old access tunnels. My ancestors built them. She won't know them." They found the entrance, a hidden panel behind the speaker's podium. They plunged into the darkness, the sound of alarms blaring above them. They ran for what felt like miles, through ancient, damp tunnels, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. She knew, Virelia gasped as they finally paused in a small junction chamber. Lyra knew the truth and she didn't care. She was going to kill me, for order. "Some people are just broken, V," Jace said, his voice quiet. He handed her his spare energy pistol. "I won't let her," Virelia said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. She looked at the pistol, then at the tunnels. "The data, I couldn't get it. It's over." "No," Jace said. He tapped the side of his stolen helmet. "I am a traitor's lapdog, remember? I was in the comms hub. When Valerius was gloating, I wasn't just listening. I was downloading." He pulled a data chip from his armor. "I got Whiskey Blue's full sensor logs. The Ghost Road, the Destroyer, your conversation in the cargo bay, your whole story. It's all here." Virelia looked at the chip, then she looked up, a new, fierce light in her eyes. "The projector," she said. "What?" "The Senate dome, it's empty. But the old projector, it's still there. It's an ancient system, pre-war. It was designed to broadcast to the entire planet, to every node, in a time of crisis. It runs on a separate, ancient power grid. Lyra won't even know it exists." "You're crazy," Jace said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "We just ran from there. They're searching for us." "They're searching the tunnels leading away," she said, her mind racing. "The scientist and the strategist now won. They won't expect us to go back." They ran, back through the canals. Jace takes out 2 more guard patrols with ruthless, silent efficiency. They emerged back into the Senate dome. It was still empty. The smoke from the destroyed execution machine hanging in the air. "There," Virelia pointed to a control station covered in dust. She slammed her hand on the panel. The ancient machine groaned. A massive holographic projector in the center of the dome hummed to life. "It needs a source," Jace said, holding up the chip. "Here." She ripped a panel from the console, revealing a legacy data port. Jace jammed the chip in. "It's working, it's broadcasting." On the massive central display, the Whiskey Blue's sensor logs appeared. The face of Virelia, in the cargo bay, her voice shaking, began to tell her story. "My name is Virelia Alaris, and I am a war criminal, but I am not the only one." The image flickered, replaced by data. The technical specifications of the mirror engine, the encrypted orders from General Kalen, the truth of Cygnus 4, the atrocity of New Corinth. "It's going out," Jace yelled, watching the console. Planetary nodes. Public view screens. Thousands of private terminals. They're seeing it. "Jace!" her Virelia shouted. The main doors to the dome burst open. Lyra was there, flanked by a dozen elite guards. "Cut the broadcast," Lyra screamed, her face a mask of pure fury. "Cut it now!" A guard fired a heavy plasma bolt at the ancient projector. The machine exploded. The holographic image of Virelia, her voice heavy with the truth, dissolved into static. The dome was silent. "Fools," Lyra seethed, advancing. "Do you think that changed anything? You think a 2-minute broadcast of a traitor's lies can undo my work? It's over." "No," Virelia said, stepping out from the shadows of the console. Jace was beside her, his blaster empty. "It's just beginning." From outside, a new sound, a distant growing roar. It wasn't an alarm. It was people. Shouting. Jace looked at the console. The broadcast. It was cut short, but the planetary network, it's buzzing. The nodes are sharing the data packet. They're spreading it themselves. A small red light flashed on the console. Civil unrest. Sector 4. Sector 7. Lyra's face went pale. The truth was out. It was cut short, but it was enough. The spark had been lit. "Kill them," Lyra whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "Kill them now." The city of Serathine Prime did not sleep that night. It screamed. The broadcast from the Senate Dome had been cut short, severed by a plasma bolt to the projector. But the data had already bled out. It moved like a contagion through the planetary network, jumping from node to node, bypassing the government's desperate firewalls. The truth about the mirror engine, the massacre at New Corinth, and the manufactured heroism of General Kalen was no longer a secret whispered in the dark. It was a roar in the streets. Virelia and Jace did not see the riots, but they felt them. The ground vibrated with the march of thousands. The sky, usually a pristine, regulated void, was choked with the smoke of burning government vehicles and the erratic searchlights of drone patrols. They had fled the dome in the chaos, slipping through the confused lines of the Imperial Guard as the mob breached the outer perimeter. Now, they sought shelter in the one place Virelia knew her sister would not look, simply because it held no strategic value. The Royal Archives, or rather, what was left of them. The building was a skeleton of white stone and shattered glass, a victim of the orbital bombardments from the war 20 years ago. It had never been rebuilt, standing as a silent, jagged monument to the conflict that had defined their lives. They sat in the remains of the Great Hall. The roof was gone, leaving them exposed to the stars and the drifting smoke. Vines of alien ivy climbed the broken pillars, and the floor was a mosaic of waterlogged data crystals and rotting paper. Jay sat on a fallen slab of marble, cleaning the grime and blood from his blaster. He looked exhausted. His stolen armor was gone, discarded in the tunnels, leaving him in the torn, dirty jumpsuit. He looked at Virelia. She was standing near the center of the room, looking up at the constellations through the open roof. She was barefoot, her feet cut and dirty from their flight. Her jumpsuit was scorched from the energy discharge of the execution machine. She looked like a ghost haunting her own grave. "I used to come here," she said softly. Her voice was hoarse. "Before the war, before the core, I would sit right there under the skylight and read the old star charts. I thought the universe was a math problem. I thought if I could just solve the equation, I could fix everything." Jace holstered his weapon and walked over to her. He moved slowly, his body aching from the crash, the fight, and the sheer weight of the last few days. He stopped behind her, not touching her, just offering his presence as a shield against the dark. "You did solve it," Jace said. "You found the truth. You let it out. And look at the result," she said, gesturing toward the distant orange glow of fires on the horizon. "Chaos, violence, my sister was right. Order is safe. The truth burns." "Fire cleanses," Jace countered. It burns away the rot. That city out there? It was built on a lie that killed my friends, a lie that killed your soul. Let it burn. She turned to face him. In the dim light of the stars and the distant fires, her face was a map of tragedy. The silver markings on her temples, once a symbol of her royal status, were smudged with soot. The scars on her arms were visible. I lied to you, she whispered. From the moment you pulled me out of that wreck, I played the victim. I played the innocent. I manipulated you, Jace, just like I manipulated the data. I know, he said. And you, she continued, her eyes searching for him. You hated me. You hated what I represented. You carried the ghosts of your squad like chains. You wanted to kill the person responsible for New Corinth. I know, he repeated. So what are we doing? She asked, her voice breaking. Why are you still here? You could have run. In the confusion at the dome, you could have vanished. Why are you standing in a ruin with a war criminal? Jace reached out and took her hand. His grip was rough, calloused, and undeniably real. Because we are the only two people left who understand the fire, he said. We both lost our homes. We both lost our honor. We both have blood on our hands that will never wash off. You are not innocent, Virelia, and neither am I. That is why I am here. He pulled her closer. The resistance went out of her. She collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest, her tears soaking the dirty fabric of his jumpsuit. He held her, his chin resting on her blue-dyed hair. We found love in the fire, he whispered into the night. It's the only thing that's real. They stood there for a long time, two broken things holding each other together in the ruins of a dead world. The silence was broken by the sound of a single, slow clap. Jace spun, placing himself between Virelia and the sound, his blaster instantly in his hand. From the shadows of the ruined entrance, a figure emerged. It was not a squad of shock troopers. It was Queen Lyra. She was alone. She wore a dark cloak over her royal robes, the hood pulled up to hide her face. She walked with the terrifying, calm grace of a predator who knows it has already won. Touching, Lyra said, her voice echoing off the broken stone. Truly, a smuggler and a traitor, finding romance in the gutter. It would make a compelling opera, if opera weren't banned under the new decency laws. Stop right there, Jace warned, leveling his weapon at the Queen's chest. I don't miss this range. I know you don't. Sergeant Harlan, Lyra said, ignoring the gun. She stopped 10 paces away. But if you kill me, the orbital guard has orders to glass this entire district. I am the only thing keeping you alive right now. Virelia stepped out from behind Jace. She placed a hand on his arm, lowering his weapon slightly. What do you want? Lyra, Virelia asked. You tried to execute me 3 hours ago, and did you come to finish the job yourself? I considered it, Lyra admitted. She looked around the ruined library with a sneer of distaste. But the situation has evolved. Your little stunt with the projector has made things complicated. The city is rioting. Half the military is confused. The other half is holding the line. If I kill you now, you become a martyr, the saint of the mirror engine. Your death would become a rallying cry that could topple the throne. Good, Jace growled. Bad, Lyra corrected sharply. Bad for everyone. Civil war destroys infrastructure, it halts trade, it weakens us against the Terran coalition. I do not want a pile of ash, little sister. I want a kingdom. So you're here to negotiate, Virelia realized. I am here to offer a deal, Lyra said. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a data pad. She tossed it onto the floor between them. New identities, Lyra said. New biometrics. A heavy freighter is waiting at the starport, cleared for deep space transit. It carries enough credits to buy a small moon in the outer rim. Virelia stared at the device. You want me to leave? I want you gone, Lyra hissed, her composure cracking for a split second to reveal the hatred underneath. I want you to vanish. I will tell the people you died in the riots, a tragic accident. I will spin the story, quell the unrest and restore order. You get to live. You get your smuggler. You get to be happy or miserable, I don't care, as long as you are never seen again. And if I refuse? Then you face a public trial, Lyra said coldly. Tomorrow morning, the High Court. I will drag every skeleton out of your closet. I will paint you not as a whistleblower, but as a mentally unstable terrorist who caused the massacre at New Corinth for attention. I will tear you apart, piece by piece, in front of the entire galaxy. And then, I will execute you lawfully. Lyra turned to leave. The ship leaves in 4 hours. If you are not on it, the guards will come for you at dawn. Choose wisely, sister. Survival is a rare gift. She vanished into the shadows, leaving the data pad lying in the dust. Jace walked over and picked it up. He looked at it, then at Virelia. We take it, he said. The relief in his voice was palpable. V, this is it. This is the out. We leave. Tonight. We go to the rim, somewhere no one knows the name Seraphine. We can live. Virelia looked at the pad in his hands. Then she looked at the sky. The smoke was clearing, revealing the bright, indifferent stars. No, she said. Jace froze. What? I'm not going. Virelia, listen to me, Jace said, stepping closer, his voice urgent. She's right. A trial is a trap. She controls the courts. She controls the narrative. You walk into that room and you die. This isn't a game. We won the moral victory, then we got the truth out. Now we survive, and then that's the prize. Is it? She turned to him, her eyes blazing with a fire that terrified him. If I run now, everything Lyra says becomes true. If I vanish, I become a coward. I became the traitor who broke the world and fled. The truth I broadcast, it will be spun. It will be erased. Lyra will write the history books, and in those books, Uncle Kalen will still be a hero, and I will still be a monster. You'll be alive, Jace shouted, grabbing her shoulders. I don't care about history books, I care about you. I can't watch you die, V. I won't do it. She reached up and cupped his face. Her hands were steady. I will stand before them and burn if I must, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. But I won't let them lie anymore. I spent my whole life hiding, behind palace walls, behind scientific theory, behind a princess's mask. Even with you, I hid. I am done hiding. Jace, I need to look them in the eye. It's suicide, he whispered. Maybe, she said, but it's the truth. Will you stand with me? Jace looked at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes, a force of nature that was stronger than any weapon he had ever carried. He hated it, and he loved her for it. He dropped the data pad. He crushed it under his boot. We're going to need better clothes, he said. The High Court of Seraphine was a cavernous amphitheater of black obsidian and floating lights. It was packed. Senators, military commanders, guild leaders, and representatives from the Terran coalition filled the tiered seats. The air was thick with the noise of 1,000 conversations, a low, angry hum of judgment. At the center of the room, on a raised platform, stood Virelia. She wore no royal robes. She wore a simple gray prisoner's tunic. She was barefoot. Her blue hair had been washed out, leaving it a stark, pale black. She wore no makeup to hide the fatigue, the scars, or the silver markings of her lineage. She looked small, vulnerable, and utterly unafraid. Jace stood at the edge of the platform, designated as her legal counsel, only because he had refused to leave her side and had threatened to break the arm of the bailiff who tried to remove him. He wore a clean, borrowed jacket over his jumpsuit. His hand rested on his holster. He scanned the crowd, counting threats. There were too many to count. Queen Lyra sat on the high seat, looking down at her sister like a god examining an insect. "Virelia Alaris," the Chief Justice boomed, his voice amplified to rattle the ribs of everyone in the hall. "You stand accused of high treason, catastrophic negligence leading to the deaths of 60 million sentient beings at New Corinth, and the theft of state secrets. How do you plead?" The room went silent. Every camera drone focused on the woman in the center. Virelia stepped forward. She did not look at the justice. She did not look at Lyra. She looked at the camera drones. She looked at the galaxy. "I plead guilty," she said. Her voice was clear, ringing like a bell in the silence. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Jace tensed. "I plead guilty to creating the mirror engine," she continued. "I plead guilty to being arrogant enough to think I could heal a star without understanding the darkness in the hearts of men. I plead guilty to leaking the data to the Terran Coalition, an act of desperation that failed." She paused, her eyes locking onto General Kalen's empty seat in the front row, a symbolic reminder of the hero. "But I do not ask for your forgiveness," she said, her voice rising, gaining strength. "I do not ask for your pity. I ask only for your understanding, because while I lit the match, it was not my hand that poured the fuel." "Objection!" the royal prosecutor shouted. "The accused is grandstanding. Stick to the charges." "Let her speak," a voice shouted from the upper tiers. Then another, "Let her speak." Lyra raised a hand, silencing the room. "Let her dig her grave," she said coldly. Virelia nodded. "You call me a traitor because I betrayed my family, but my family betrayed you. The mirror engine was weaponized on orders from this throne. The target at New Corinth was chosen not by accident, but by a committee of generals who sat in this very room. They wanted a demonstration. They wanted fear. And when it went wrong, when the sun tore apart, they needed a villain. They gave you me." She walked to the edge of the platform, looking directly at a group of Terran ambassadors. "I am a war criminal," she said. "I accept that title. I carry the weight of every life lost at New Corinth. I see their faces when I sleep. But do not look at me and tell me I am the only one. The Terran 7th Fleet bombed Seraphine Prime based on lies they knew were lies, because they wanted vengeance. We are all drowning in blood. The difference is, I am the only one willing to admit it." She turned back to Lyra. "You offered me silence," Virelia said. "You offered me life if I would just go away. But I cannot be innocent anymore. I can only be honest. So judge me, execute me. But do not pretend it is for justice. You are killing me to bury the truth." She stopped. The silence in the hall was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. Jace watched the crowd. He saw anger, yes, but he also saw doubt. He saw older men looking at their feet. He saw Terran delegates exchanging uneasy glances. "Enough," the Chief Justice said, looking to Lyra for a cue. Lyra gave a subtle nod. "The prisoner has confessed. The sentence for high treason is mandatory. Death by—" "Wait." The word cut through the room. A figure stood up in the middle of the Senate tiers. It was a young man, barely 30. He wore the robes of a junior senator from the industrial sector, the sector that had rioted the hardest. "Senator Kale," the justice sneered. "Sit down." "I will not," the young man said. His voice shook, but he held his ground. The prisoner speaks the truth. This is a court of law, not a debate hall." "It is a court of truth," Senator Kale shouted. My brother served on the Pride of Serathine. He was in the control room when the mirror engine fired. He sent me a message before he died of radiation poisoning. He said they were aiming at the colony. He said it was an order. The room erupted, shouts of denial mixed with shouts of agreement. He is lying. Lyra stood up, her composure shattering. Remove him! I have the data, the senator yelled, holding up a drive. The logs from his personal comms, I was too afraid to bring them forward, until today. Until she stood there and admitted her guilt. If the traitor has the courage to speak, then so do I. I stand with Senator Kale, another voice rang out, an older woman, a matriarch of a powerful mining guild. My sons died at New Corinth. I want to know why. Order! The justice banged his gavel, the sound lost in the noise. Order! Jace moved. He stepped up beside Virelia, his hand unholstering his blaster, not to fire, but to show he was ready. He put his back to hers. It's turning, he whispered to her. You did it! Virelia was trembling. Tears were streaming down her face, but she stood rigid. She wasn't looking at the chaos, and she was looking at Lyra. Lyra looked down at the scene. She saw the senator. She saw the guild matriarch. She saw the doubt spreading like a virus. She realized, with the cold calculation of a tyrant, that she had lost the narrative. If she executed Virelia now, the city would burn, and her throne would burn with it. She sat down slowly. She gestured to the Chief Justice. A silent, furious communication passed between them. The justice pounded his gavel, amplifying the sound until the room was forced into a ringing silence. In light of new evidence, the justice spat the words out. And in consideration of the prisoner's confession, the Crown is prepared to offer a commutation. Virelia blinked. Jace tensed. The sentence of death is withdrawn, the justice announced. A wave of shock went through the room. However, the justice continued, his voice hard. Virelia Alaris has confessed to crimes against the state and the galaxy. She cannot remain here. She cannot remain. Virelia Alaris. He looked down at her. The sentence is permanent, irrevocable exile. You are stripped of your titles. You are stripped of your citizenship. You are stripped of your name. From this moment forth, the House of Serathine does not recognize your existence. You will be escorted to the edge of Serathine space and ejected. If you ever return, the sentence of death will be carried out immediately. Do you accept it? Virelia looked at Lyra one last time. Her sister's face was a mask of stone, but in her eyes, Virelia saw the defeat. Lyra had kept her throne, but she had lost her power over the truth. Virelia looked at Jace. He nodded, a small, weary smile touching his lips. I accept, she said. The civilian freighter Horizons Bound was a bulky, ugly ship, smelling of recycled air and fuel. It was nothing like the royal skiffs of her youth, nor the sleek warships of her nightmares. It was perfect. Jace and Virelia stood at the airlock. They had been escorted there by a silent guard detail. They carried nothing but the clothes on their backs and a small survival kit Jace had managed to keep. They walked down the gangway, past crates of livestock and machinery. No one looked at them. To the crew, they were just two more drifters looking for work on the frontier. They found a spot near a viewing port on the observation deck as the ship prepared to jump. The stars of the Serathine system were bright and cold outside the glass. Virelia pressed her hand against the transparent steel. She was watching her home disappear. She was leaving everything, her history, her family, her name. She was a ghost. Jace stood beside her. He watched her, not the stars. You okay? He asked quietly. I don't know, she admitted. I feel light, Like I've been carrying a mountain for 10 years and someone just put it down. You dropped it, Jace said. You faced it and you dropped it. I have no name, she said, turning to him. I have no home. I have no money. I am nobody. You're alive, Jace said. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. And you're with me. We'll find a name. We'll find a home. There are a lot of stars out there, V, and not all of them are burning. The ship's engines whined, building up the charge for the jump to the outer rim, to an uncharted colony where the news feeds didn't reach, where the war was just a distant story. She looked at him, the rugged intelligence officer who had crashed into her life, the man who had hated her, saved her, fought for her, and loved her. She squeezed his hand. A small smile, real and hopeful, broke through the exhaustion on her face. He thought I was innocent, she whispered. The words meant only for him and the stars. Until I told him the story that changed everything. Jace smiled back, pulling her close as the stars elongated into streaks of light. And it was a hell of a story. The dawn on the colony world of Ethelgard was not gold or blue. It was a deep, vibrant crimson. The twin suns rose over a horizon of jagged purple mountains, casting long shadows across the valley where the settlement lay. Two figures walked along the ridgeline, silhouetted against the massive red sun. They wore simple, rough-spun clothes. They carried tools for farming, packs for supplies. They walked close together, their shoulders brushing. They did not look back at the sky or wonder about the politics of empires far away. They looked at the path ahead. They were free. They were unnamed. They were in love. They were haunted. Yes, the ghosts would always walk a few paces behind them. But as they crested the hill and walked down into the red light of the new day, they were healing.